When Crunch was first released, he was the very first hero to actually have combos in his kit. Sure, other heroes had very nice synergy between their abilities, but Crunch actually has combos designed into his kit. So with that, if you can animation cancel his basic attacks, he actually has a very interesting dynamic. You can use his abilities as your attack speed and actually forego attack speed altogether. This makes him basically into a caster that has a terrifying effect. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a hero building guide. I am Sylphin. We're taking a look at Crunch here, and as I said in the intro, he's quite interesting. So Crunch is a fighter. He is a fighter, and he's meant to get in there, deal some damage, and how much damage and how long he can stay in the fray is up to you. Now his basic attack here is interesting. It's 0.7 power scaling, which is good for a fighter. It's very good for a fighter. Starts off okay, but it doesn't go up very much at all. In the late game, his basic attack really doesn't do it doesn't do as much as a lot of other heroes, let's say that. It does hit fairly quickly, so that is okay. But what also happens is look at his attack speed. It is quite a bit. It is quite a bit. His scaling on for his attack speed per hero level is actually quite a bit. So he's going to start off hitting okay. He gets a lot of benefit from power on it, and he's going to be attacking quickly in the late game. Meaning you need to empower your basic attack here at level 15 with a lot of power in order to get actually quite a good value with it. So that's kind of why I'm going with this theme here that we build Crunch as a caster. We're going to talk about that more later. His right mouse button really is not used for damage, but it is a part of it. 160 damage here with 0.25 power scaling. Not really all that much damage. His left Crunch is his monster of an ability. 0.75 power scaling. Really good for a fighter. Not as great as caster's power scaling, but it is fantastic, and it does a ton of damage. 100% cleave thrown in there at level 4. It's insane. 225. That power scaling, oh, it hurts. With right Crunch, it's not that much power scaling, 0.5, but 205 damage with that slow. It's a great, all of his abilities are fantastic, as they all add up together to kind of increase, do the whole job of what Crunch does. So his ultimate here is whatever the previous ability you used, you use it again. You use this, boom, and you can copy your last attack. So whether it's the other ones, it's really up to you with a passive, very interesting passive that we'll talk about later. Now, a fairly interesting thing about Crunch is that he has tank scaling health. When tanks used to be an actual classification, he has tank scaling health. So he has a lot of it, 1700 basically. So that's quite good. And then everything else is standard fighter. Like we said earlier, he gains quite a bit of attack speed per hero level, which makes this perspective that we're looking at on Crunch really actually quite interesting, because he's going to be hitting not that much in the late game. You can just pour on that power with quite a bit of attack speed that you'll get leveling up to actually make his basic attack still do a good amount of damage. With that animation cancel, you'll be able to get quite a good attack speed. Now, in this build, we aren't going to have very much CP left over for tankiness. So with that said, we have to go in and think as if we're a melee tank here, just because he basically is with his base stats. We're gonna have to see how many people here actually end up, how much CP actually ends up being effective in terms of increasing our effective health. So we want equal damage reduction for both basic damage and ability damage, and that is very, very important. So with that said, you can see that you need a ton of health. You need a ton of health into on Crunch in order for the effective health to, in order for that to make mathematical sense. So you need a ton of health, 15 CP's worth of health, 18 before you even get one basic armor and one ability armor. That is really important. So basically here in this build, all of our sustain is going to be coming from health, and even if you were to make Crunch a bruiser, you would need a lot of health there. Again, 18 CP's worth of health in order for armor to actually start working. So just keep that in mind. If you are building your Crunch, you need a lot of health. So when we take a look at my DPS calculator stat optimizer, we can see that Crunch, again, is reflected by his base stats. We can see power penetration 17, because he likes power, but attack speed, not that much. 11 compared to the 17 power pen, and critical strike chance 17. That's if we're going 45. If you're going a really, really strong basic attack with crit and attack speed and stuff like that, you probably still want to have some sustain, some health in there. So that's why we're at 45 instead of 50 or 53 like a carry. But if we run down here, you can see that power and crit is very, very good because he gets so much attack speed and because he has lower scaling than a carry due to power and crit and stuff. You know, you can see here that power and crit is very powerful as they go up pretty much hand in hand. Of course, that's with the crit bonus, so you have to keep that in mind. This is with the crit bonus. Power and attack speed does the same to increase your DPS on Crunch, with attack speed trailing pretty far behind. Look how much CP you need total before attack speed even makes sense. So with that said, you can take a look here in the early game. You can basically see here you need a ton of power, 7-0, before you start going into attack speed. So you will see that reflected here in this build. Even though we're going caster, it would still make sense to put a lot of power on Crunch first before attack speed, especially since you can animation cancel with your abilities. Because you can animation cancel with your ability, you're basically only getting half the value of attack speed. Kind of. You're kind of getting only half the value of attack speed. Kind of. So, guys, that's really all you need to know. Because we aren't going a basic attack build with him, this is not too relevant, but I just wanted to show you, just because if you want to go with a basic attack build on Crunch, you can see power and crit is really valuable. It's basically just, they're equal in terms of increasing his DPS versus attack speed. You really don't need that much. When we come in here and take a look at the deck, we can see that we start off with the Centurion. Simply because they're in the late game, you are frontline / initiator if you really want to come in from the side. You are frontline, and that health is going to be very important. You also do a lot of damage, so it works out very well. You start off with a lot of damage, and then you transition into a fairly good frontline with a good amount of health in the late game. So we're lots of damage in the early and mid game, with good utility in the mid game, late game going into more of a frontline. That's why we get the Centurion, just to get that frontline ability. Now, I do manage to get a healer token in here if you want to take him in the off lane. Really, I don't think I've ever seen that, but I just threw that in there. Cast token and a health potion if you do need that. You start off the game with the Sage's Sylphin, because you definitely need that to go into the jungle. You get your Sage's Sylphin, no upgrades in it. You go into this Guardian's Ward for your ward next, because you really, really need that ward. Then you have a very interesting, very interesting thing that happens. You don't upgrade your Guardian's Ward. You don't. And actually go into the Madstone Gem, just because every point of power in that you put in here is actually, you get your money's worth, but you do get the Guardian's Ward. But this Madstone Gem would just be great anyway. So go into this Madstone Gem, go back in here for the Guardian's Ward. You unlock a little bit of health, which you don't really need there in the very early game. Anyways, after you finish off the upgrades on this Guardian's Ward, you go into this Madstone Gem, for a whole bunch of power again. We don't really need much attack speed, and we just get a few points of it, which is very mathematically sound. After those 3 Madstone Gems, you can, at any time in there, get this Blink Shot. You can get this Blink Shot if you need it. The reason why I like this Blink Shot, you can still use it in emergency situations, and it only costs 1 more minute than a normal Blink Charm, but it gives you a CP of power. And you can reset its cooldown on player kill. Now, Crunch can finish people off like nobody's business, so those 3 reasons alone, I think, is way more enough for me for Blink Shot to, you know, for Blink Shot to be worth it over a Blink Charm for sure. So that's why I'm choosing to go for Blink Shot, just because there's the power and the reset, and you can still use it in emergency situations. You can, I totally like that. After that Blink Shot, the Guardian's Ward is 3 Madstone Gems. You get rid of your Sage's Sylphin, really any time in there that you need it, which will be pretty soon. You get the Stinger Boost and the Toxigel. You get the Stinger Boost first if you, if you're doing fine with the health department. You don't need any, like, you know, you don't need the sustain that the Toxigel gives you. This empowers your basic attack. You gain bonus ability damage equal to 50 plus 20% of your power after you hit somebody with a ability. Oh, it's insane. It totally synergizes with Crunch amazingly. It's absolutely amazing. Fantastic card to just add so much value to his basic attacks. Then you get Toxigel, Burst Cleanse, taking 400 damage within 5 seconds, activates a cleanse. Why do we get this one? Just because Crunch needs to keep doing his thing. He needs to just keep hitting you. He can't. He doesn't like being stunned, or else he's just dead. And if he is stunned, then that interrupts his own innate combo. So you need to keep doing your thing. That's why we get Toxigel, because you need to keep doing your thing. It will keep you alive, and arguably more importantly to your role, kills the enemy. So that is why you need that. He needs to keep doing his thing. That's why we get the Toxigel. Then the next 3 cards that you get are this Elder Mage Amulet, Elysian Diamond, and this Guardian's Ward. 2 major strikes and a greater health each. I get the Elysian Diamond first, just because it has a 1 CP of mana regen, which you'll need it more in the mid game anyways than the late game. I get the Elysian Diamond first, Elder Mage Amulet, then the Guardian's Ward, and finally at that point you can get this Meltdown at the end. You can get this Meltdown. Only then can you get this Meltdown, because you need that much power. You need full build power in order for this ability pen to make mathematical sense. You're not getting full value out of it until the very late game. So save the Meltdown for the very last card that you get. And even then, well, then at that point, yeah, you can get the 2 major shocks before that major cast. So then you can do that. The final build, guys, is Toxigel, Stinger Boost. You get rid of your Blink Shot just because you're kind of supposed to, you know, be frontline. So, you know, no emergency situation. I mean, you can secure kills, but your main role in the end game is frontline. After that, you get this Meltdown, this Guardian's Ward, this Elysian Diamond, and this Elder Mage Amulet. It's a fair amount of health. There's a fair amount of health in here with the Toxigel to, you know, make sure that you can keep doing your thing. Maybe escape if it's really going bad. Really helps with the Stinger Boost in there. That ability pen. Oh my goodness. Ugh, it's terrifying. So here in the early game, we are a jungle. Crunch really excels in the jungle. I started way off in the outside camp, and actually that's maybe not ideally what you do. I want to show this to you just because it actually doesn't end up hurting the rotation that bad. We simply get the 3 white camps. I should have just gone to the green camp, but I was like, what am I doing? And we go over to this green camp. Once you kill the green camp, then you kind of do 1 or 2 more white camps, but you gotta be at the jungle, at the river buff in time. So as you can see, I'm here, and I go over to contest the jungle buff. So I go over here, I get this one nice and scot-free, and then I jump over here to try to help out my mid laner, but Seraph doesn't want to play. That is the early game rotation. If you do it fast enough, you can get 2 white camps, 2 more white camps after you get that green camp, but I was just simply not fast enough. Of course, you get the Sylphin first, and you get your Q ability, your left crunch. Your left crunch is the big, huge damage cleave ability that you definitely need to use a couple times in that early rotation. Just kill the minions nice and quick. As you can see, I get over here just in time as that 5th white camp is spawning, and I'm doing a good job of kiting the minions around, trying to make sure that my cleave, the cleave that you do naturally have, is on there. At this point, it's a perfect time to head over here to gank this Sparrow. Kaboomy! Completely annihilated. We'll go back and take another look at that. As you can see, I hugged the outside wall to make sure. They even had a ward, so I'm not sure. I don't know if they were just kind of not paying attention. But there's my slow, my next ability that I get in the jungle, your right crunch, which is your slow. It doesn't hit that hard, but it applies a slow on the enemy. I do that one first to make sure that I can get some more basic attacks off, and then use my left crunch, the big damage dealer. The last ability that I choose to get is the forward crunch, your right click. Simply because if you can slow down the enemy, that not only helps you, but that also helps your allies. So I would much rather get that and my left crunch, which is the one that deals a lot of damage, and actually try to kill them, and before I get that forward crunch, which can be used as both an engage but also a disengage. Now, one really important thing about crunch, really important, like astronomically important, is animation canceling. You can see me kind of doing it there. I'm pretty sure I do manage to do that. So let's see. You can see I hit the once with the basic attack, then an ability that left crunch, and then that cancels out the last half of the basic attack animation. So let's get here and then watch. One, and then I hit him with the ability, and then there's my next basic attack. You can see that right there. Go back and take a look at it. You animation cancel. Now, the whole premise about this build, as I've been saying, is that you can use your abilities as your attack speed to increase your basic attack speed. Because your animation, your abilities can cut the last half of your basic attack animation, that acts as your attack speed. So that's very, very important. You need to practice that with crunch, so that you can just weave in those basic attacks really well. Now, the one really hard thing is that you have to also decide whether or not you need to get all of your abilities off and not weave in your basic attacks. Now, oh yeah, this is a complete terrible. I have no idea what I'm doing right there. That was a terrible gank, an absolutely horrendous gank. And that is actually the showcase of something else. Crunch's abilities queue up. I don't think any other hero does that, but his abilities actually queue up. So I can see, like, I'm pressing buttons there that I didn't actually press for like a second or two, just because I spammed a couple abilities, but his abilities queue up. So if you press Q, E, R, he's gonna go Q, then E, then R. So you have to be really careful. You have to be really careful with what buttons you press and when you press them. Because as you can see there, I just wasted 3 abilities, just like that. You have to be really careful in order to do that. As I was saying before, in some situations, you might actually need to just spam your abilities and get the abilities off without weaving in your basic attacks. You'll have to learn that there's some... whether or not you'll have enough time to weave in a basic attack or not. Simply because his ultimate is the last ability that we do get. So his ultimate is very interesting. Not only does it copy the basic attack that you just used, but it also has a passive effect. All basic attacks that you land while your ultimate is on cooldown, or any ability is on cooldown, you reduce the cooldown of your abilities by 5 seconds, I do believe, or that time actually increases, whichever. It reduces your cooldowns on your abilities. So when your abilities are on cooldown, if you can just go to town with your basic attacks on somebody, it chips away at the cooldowns of the rest of your abilities. So that is kind of a pseudo reason why you want to weave in your basic attacks, but also to get that damage and get that value out of canceling the animations. Sometimes, oh, and also the ultimate, my train of thought, sorry, your ultimate has an empowered state. All of your abilities, when they are empowered, when they are the third ability in a row, every third ability you use is empowered, and certain things do different things. Your left crunch, the big damage heavy one, deals even more damage and more cleave, I do believe. Your E, instead of slowing somebody, knocks somebody up, which you'll see here. I do exactly my left, right, and then my re-crunch to knock up that sparrow and completely annihilate them. Your right crunch, or your forward crunch, that kind of you shoot forward a pretty good distance. When it's empowered, when it's a third ability in a row, you actually go a little bit farther, an extra 300 units in range, and you drag heroes with you. Normally, you'll just stop on heroes. You'll just kind of stop when you hit them. And as you can see, we just kind of completely just annihilate that Serath, and then we actually take her this rampage as I hesitate going in on him. Completely annihilated. Your forward crunch, instead, when it's empowered, will go right through people. You'll drag them a fair distance, and if you can manage to do it, I can barely do it, you can push somebody into a tower, push somebody into an inhibitor, stuff like that, which is really hard to do. Now, I find most of the time you want to use your stun combo, your left, right, re combo. Left to deal a ton of damage, your right to apply that slow, and then your re-crunch to make the third ability, which re-crunch is, of your right crunch, making it empowered and doing that stun. Most of the time I find I'm using that simply because that stun is just has an incredible value. You get more basic attacks, you get a chance to maybe use a couple more abilities on them. Obviously it helps the rest of your team. Most of the time I find myself using QER, left, right, re combo, or my forward, right, re. That's usually what ends up happening. Now, here is a showcase of his escape ability, and look at how I get a 2-person empowered right crunch, and then I just use my forward crunch to get away. If you can gank from the sides, have great positioning with crunch, you can do actually quite a bit. You really can. Because you save your forward crunch, like you can use your forward crunch to engage on the target, but what that does is then you don't have it as an escape. And that's not the greatest because, well, you're probably going to die. I usually try with crunch as much as possible to really save my forward crunch, come in from the side, get into good positioning, maybe rely on my teammates a bit to kind of create a good engagement. But really, I would recommend trying to save your forward crunch as much as possible to either secure a kill or, probably more importantly, escape with your life. Now, here is an example of initiating with crunch. I use my forward crunch to get onto him. I land my E, and then I use my ultimate. That is an example. I use my ultimate to get the stun on the Sparrow. Great initiation there, but also an example of me having to use my abilities all at once instead of weaving in basic attacks. I would not have been able to have stunned that Sparrow if I had weaved my basic attacks. Too much time would have gone. Too much time would have passed. She would have gotten away from me, and I wouldn't have been able to get that stun, which secured the kill for our team. You have to you gotta get a good sense. Can I weave in my basic attacks? Do I have enough time in order to get 3 abilities off and get that empowered state off and get the value from that, whether that be a stun or some crazy damage and cleave with your left crunch, or do you know, or do you have enough time to sit there and weave in your basic attacks? Really up to you. And I think really good crunch players know that and position well for it, so that usually they can just weave in those basic attacks and get a ton of damage out on you. Now, this engagement here on this Bellica would have been an example of when I could have weaved in my basic attacks. Obviously, we had more than enough time to body block her before she came in, but as you can see, with Stinger Boost now online, you can see the 3 Madstone gems, and I didn't even go for the blink shot because I didn't feel like I needed it at this point. That Stinger Boost is online, and oh my goodness, it's insane. I remember this game, and I'm just like, I'm crying because it's just like the damage is just dumb. Now, here's a failed job on my part. I don't secure the kill on this Greystone. I have no idea how. And I go hard on this Sparrow. I use my forward crunch, get myself out of position. I come back, and then I get 1v3. This is just a short glimpse as to why you need to go frontline in the late game. You need to be that frontline for your team, because once damage comes online for the enemy team, because you're such a high priority target, you're going to get taken down very easily. You want that health. You need that health in order to just start taking this damage from the enemy team. It takes time to get used to crunch, and that's really important. Now here I do a pretty good job here of trying to weave in my basic attacks, but the forward crunch is just, you gotta really get used to using it, because I used it once to try to get that Greystone as he walks away, and then I turn around and use my forward crunch to try to get out of there, but I run into the tower. Crunch is both clumsy and elegant at the same time. If you can just get used to him, get used to how he works, kind of just the feel for him, he works really well. If not, you get complete face, you get face palms like you just saw. So there's a bit of an engagement here on our in the mid lane. And why am I here in the jungle? Because again, because I mentioned already, I really like saving that forward crunch. And as a fighter, as any melee hero, you got to get the jump on your enemy. You got to come out of nowhere and not just let them wail into you as you're just running towards them. So I'm trying to position here off to the side. Unfortunately, the duo here doesn't want to engage there on the inhibitor or draw them out or something like that, as I'm trying to kind of bait this Greystone in, and there he is. I'm like, okay, yeah, yeah, that's fine. You can just waste your make way, and I can come in, maybe get a 3-on-2, but nothing really happens. That's kind of that's a little example of the positioning I'm trying to do here with my team. Unfortunately, now once I try to go over here, then they rotate left lane. I'm like, oh no, I got to go all the way over there. That's just an example of what kind of positioning you want, and then it becomes a 4v2, and I'm like, oh dear. So unfortunately, that didn't go there. I didn't see the Serath that was right there. I could have finished her off. So positioning is just very, very important, and you got to do it. And you know, you have great escape with your forward crunch into a recrunch to get 2 forward crunches to really traverse some distance. But otherwise, positioning is very, very key. Here am I here at the very end of the game, trading my life for the enemy carry. I go in and I weave in my basic attacks here. Now look, I almost finish her off. She has a fantastic blink. And there is an example. If I had finished my rotation there, my left crunch was already up. Believe it or not, my left crunch was already up to have totally finished her off there. But I just couldn't do it. Trading my life there for the Sparrow, who was at least forced to retreat. And unfortunately, our team didn't secure the kill on her or anything. Unfortunately, that happened, but you can see there that damage potential is real, and holy smokes, it's crazy. So there you guys go. We go on to win the game as this Serath, guys. Shout out to this Serath as she was absolutely like, look at this, 14 to do, Biggie Boy 67. My God. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you like this video, like it, dislike it, dislike it, share it with the community, and guys, of course, subscribe. If you guys like this content, found it useful, I would really appreciate if you both followed me on Twitch and subscribed to me here on YouTube. Please let me know down in the comments what you guys think about Crunch, about this build, and what you guys think. Till next time, like always, stay optimistic and positive.